The Great Debate. I've been working on this translation. I'm almost finished now of the Bhagavad Gita, which is considered to be the holiest of holies in the Hindu tradition. It's equivalent, some say, to the New Testament in the West, Western canon of religious texts. It's like the Hindu Bible in a way. And from doing the translation, one word in particular really stands out. I mean, there's so many Sanskrit words that could be talked about, but I wanted to talk about just one Sanskrit word in particular, which is fascinating. And it's fascinating when you look at the different translations of the Bhagavad Gita and how they translate this one word. And the word in question here is the word purusha. Purusha is actually where we get our word in English person. It goes back to the Sanskrit. Was there an even earlier root than the Sanskrit? Possibly, I don't know. I haven't looked into that myself. But this video really is specifically about that word, which is Sanskrit purusha, and how to translate it. And that is one of the, I would say, the challenges of a translator of the Bhagavad Gita is how do you translate that word? Because the word, even in Hinduism, means different things depending on what scripture of the Hindu tradition that you read. For example, way back in the Vedas, the Purusha seems to be a cosmic person. But later, like in the Upanishads, the Purusha meant more of an abstract essence or spirit. So when I did my translation, or as I've been doing my translation, I've been using what's his name? Sorry, I'm blanking on his name all of a sudden. The Winthrop Sargent translation of the Bhagavad Gita, which is considered to be a great translation. It's an academic translation. It's considered to be one of the best translations of the Bhagavad Gita. Even people that do not agree with Winthrop Sargent say that this is one of the best translations. For example, I saw a video of Dr. Edwin Bryant, who is a great scholar of Hinduism and of these texts. He was saying good things about the Winthrop Sargent translation, even though I'm sure he knows that Winthrop Sargent translates Purusha as spirit. And Edwin Bryant is coming out of a tradition where they translate Purusha as personality or person. And I think this is a very fundamental and important point that really we need to talk about, because this is where you have these mainly two different camps. Those who know about the Hare Krishna tradition, which I really do not know that much about. I will be completely honest. I mean I know what I know. I know some things, right? I've been doing this now for, I've been on this journey myself for almost 30 years. So I know some things, but I don't know the Hare Krishna tradition like a Hare Krishna would. But what I do know is the Srila Prabhupada translation of the Bhagavad Gita translates Purusha as personality. And like Purushottama it translates as the supreme personality of God. And the Hare Krishnas, as I understand it, understand the ultimate form of Krishna to be this, a supreme person. Whereas if you look at like more in the, you might say the Shivananda Advaita Vedanta tradition, and Shivananda was more in that, seems to be more in that school of thought. And Edwin Bryant talks about this as well in some of his videos. The Shivananda school of thought, and the Winthrop Sargent school of thought, is that purusha really means spirit, and it is not a person per se, is not a supreme being in the sense of like we might think of a supreme being, but more as a supreme beingness, right? Is more of an abstraction. That would be the Advaita Vedanta point of view, and that's Advaita Vedanta is the non-dual perspective. Non-dualism means that God is one. There's no separation. There's no division. God, meaning Brahman. In this case, you might also say purusha or purushottama. That would be a state of being, right? A ground of being. I oftentimes say God is maybe better gob, right? G-O-B, ground of being, or ground of beingness. At least from the Advaita Vedanta perspective, that ultimately God is not a person, but God is more of an abstract essence. But the thing is, and Krishna even says this in the Gita, is that it's very difficult to think of God as a in the abstract, right? It's difficult to conceive of God in the abstract, and that's why in various traditions you have ways of understanding God that bring God more down to earth for people and make God more accessible. And one way to do that is to think of God as a person, and maybe as a mother, as a father, as a lover, as a friend, as a someone you can relate to, right? A relation. It's very hard to relate to in essence. But on the other hand, it's maybe the easiest thing to relate to is love. And love is not something that anyone can put their finger on, right? But we all know what love is on some, on one level or another. We understand what love is. And we know that we want love. But love is not tangible per se. So let's just so I hope I delineated the two different camps on this. Translating purusha as a supreme personality or a supreme person, or purusha as great spirit, like Native Americans, the great spirit, but not necessarily as a being or a person. So let's read a little bit from different places. The Wikipedia article on purusha says, purusha is a complex concept whose meaning evolved in Vedic and Upanishadic times. Depending on source and historical timeline, it means the cosmic being or self, awareness, and universal principle. In early Vedas, purusha was a cosmic being whose sacrifice by the gods created all life. This was one of many creation myths discussed in the Vedas. In the Upanishads, the purusha concept refers to the abstract essence of the self, spirit, and the universal principle that is eternal, indestructible, without form, and all pervasive. So, in other words, it seemed to evolve. This idea, at first it was like a cosmic being or a cosmic person, but and that was in the Vedas, which are the earliest scriptures of Hinduism, but later, or Sanatana Dharma is the other term, is really the real term for the tradition, is Sanatana Dharma, which means eternal. I like to say the eternal way, Sanatana Dharma. Hinduism was a name that was given later by, I believe, by scholars, in the 19th century or the 18th century, whenever it was. Max Mueller from Germany, one of the great German scholars of India, Indologist. He apparently, I think he no, maybe not him, but someone like him. We'd have to look at that. But anyway, my point being is that the earliest texts of the Sanatana Dharma tradition, which are the Vedas, speak of purusha, and there's a famous chant called the Purusha Suktam that gets chanted, and it's all about this supreme being, this cosmic person. But in the Upanishads, which came a little later, that has changed, and now the purusha is more of an abstract essence, spirit, a principle, and not anymore an actual person. And then it goes into Sankhya philosophy, and Sankhya philosophy, purusha is the plural immobile cosmic principle, pure consciousness, unattached and unrelated to anything, which is, quote, non-active, unchanging, eternal, and pure. Purusha uniting with Prakriti gives rise to life. And we see that in the Yoga Sutras, where basically purusha is some say pure awareness that can realize that it is pure awareness, right? That it is not Prakriti, which is the material universe. But as soon as the purusha gets caught up in thinking that it is Prakriti, then you find yourself in the world of form once again. But when the seer abides in its own true nature, which is the third sutra of the Yoga Sutras, then the purusha has separated itself from Prakriti. That would be the Sankhya, and keep in mind that Sankhya is talked about. Krishna talks about Sankhya early on in the Gita, and actually throughout the Gita. Sankhya is, you could say, the theoretical underpinnings of yoga, and yoga, according to what Krishna is presenting, is more of a practice, and Sankhya is the theory behind the practice. Sankhya, interesting enough, also means battle or battlefield, and that I think it's kind of a play on words in the Bhagavad Gita, because chapter 1 ends with they're on the Sankhya, right, and then chapter 2 is called Sankhya Yoga, and then Krishna starts talking about Sankhya and then starts to get into what is yoga. So listen to this, Wikipedia still. There is no consensus among schools of Hinduism on the definition of purusha, and it is left to each school and individual to reach their own conclusions, which they do, right? That's why, hence the debate, the great debate that I started with. For example, one of many theistic traditions, script such as Kapilasuri Samvada, credited to another ancient Hindu philosopher named Kapila, first describes purusha in a manner similar to Sankhya Yoga schools, but then proceeds to describe buddhi as second purusha and ahamkara, egoism, as third purusha. Such pluralism and diversity of thought within Hinduism implies that the term purusha is a complex term with diverse meanings. Let's just read in the Upanishads just a little bit. The Upanishads, the abstract idea of purusha is extensively discussed in various Upanishads and referred interchangeably as Paramatman and Brahman, not to be confused with Brahmin. In the Upanishads and later texts of Hindu philosophy, the purusha concept moved away from the Vedic definition of purusha and was no longer a person, cosmic man, or entity. Instead, the concept flowered into a more complex abstraction. So this seems to suggest there was a evolution of this, as we said from the beginning here, that there was an evolution of this concept, right? And it was this even used the word flowering, seeming to suggest that this was a positive evolution, right? This wasn't a devolution. This was an evolution of the term that now understood purusha in more of a abstract spiritual sense rather than as a cosmic person. I'm not going to read all of this, but then let's read. Here's a new translation of the Gita by Jeffrey Armstrong. Kavindra Rishi is his Sanskrit name. he did a very nice translation of the Gita. This is a new one that just came out. It's called The Bhagavad Gita Comes Alive, a Radical Translation. And he is clearly in the Edwin Bryant, the Hare Krishna tradition, because he mentions it at the beginning. And when he translates purusha, for example, I had a verse here that I was going to bring in where he translates purusha. All right, maybe I'm not going to find it too quickly. But he translates it as the divine person or the supreme personality. And here's what he says about purusha in the back of the book. He has defined or discussed some of the major terms in the Gita, and so he discusses purusha. So here's what Jeffrey Armstrong says. The word purusha has two roots: pura, meaning city, and isha, ruler, leader, or controller. The metaphor here is that our body is like a metropolis, and our immortal Atma is the mayor, the ruler of the body. So the Atma is the soul. But he might not, I think Jeffrey Armstrong doesn't use soul, but you could say spirit. You could also say the Atma. Maybe Jeffrey Armstrong wouldn't even translate Atma, but Atma is, it might be helpful to think of it as the soul or the spirit. The Sanskrit purusha gave us the English word person. We as the Atma are the person in charge of our body. According to this view, our entire universe is also a pura, and Paramatma is the supreme person in charge of the universe. Our Atma is a purusha, and Paramatma is also a purusha. One is the person controlling the body, and the other is the person controlling the universe. Both, though, are purushas, divine persons. Yoga is reconnecting the Atma with Paramatma in a loving relationship, living person to person with the Supreme Being. Now, this does not get into the issue, the deeper issue. Maybe Jeffrey Armstrong does elsewhere. I would like to see what he says. But the problem for an Advaita, someone who is of that lineage or that understanding, is that there's duality in this idea of that I am a purusha, and there's a cosmic purusha, there's a supreme being, that would be Krishna or Vishnu, and there are other purushas. So there are many purushas. We're all somehow separate. Maybe there's a unity with all the purushas as well, but there's also separation. So, but for an Advaitin, meaning someone who follows the non-dual tradition, that might be problematic, right? To think that there is a separation, and that God somehow is a supreme person, and not more of this abstract essence or principle or reality, or ground of beingness, let's say. And that really is, and first of all, let's just say, let's take a step back. No one really knows, right? Hence why we're even talking about this, why this is complex, because who really knows? Some people who swear they have met Krishna in heaven or wherever, in Goloka or whatever realm that Krishna is understood to inhabit, would maybe say that Krishna is a supreme personality, whereas others would say, well, you're getting caught up in the form, and ultimately God is formless, right? God is without name or form, nama rupa. God is an abstraction, ultimately. God is not something we can conceive even with our mind. God is not something that we can have a relationship with per se, but God is the relationship in totality, right? There's no relationship, there's only a oneness. So anyway, I think I'm going to leave it at that. I mean, one last thing we can say. One reason I bring this up is because I'm also a student of A Course in Miracles, and this debate is also right there in A Course in Miracles. In the world of A Course in Miracles, there are some who understand A Course in Miracles in a dualistic way, or a somewhat dualistic, you could say modified dualistic way, because they're not wholly dualistic, but they still see that there's a separation between God and the Son of God, which would be really the same thing, just in different language. And then there are the non-dualists who say that what the Course is really getting at is that ultimately there is only the oneness, there's only the one reality, there is no opposite, there is no second, there is no other, there is no separation, which means that God ultimately is not a person. God is God is not a being, but God is a beingness. I will leave it at that for now. I hope this broached the subject, just to get the ball rolling, and to this is just a drop in the bucket of what this is, the whole debate here. But for better or for worse, some would say for worse, there's quite a lot of theological bickering about this subject, and from what I've seen, there are, there's like different camps and almost like fighting about this issue. And I think if my take on it is that if people are just honest with themselves, they'll say, well, I really don't know, I don't know, and the scriptures can be translated, if anything that I was saying here, the Bhagavad Gita could certainly be translated both ways. That the purusha is a supreme person or supreme personality, and that purusha could be translated as supreme spirit or great spirit, or the one spirit that pervades everything, the all-pervading, unchanging, undying self of all, right? We could understand the purusha in that way. So anyway, I would love to hear your comments, your thoughts, anything you want to share in this regard. And I thank you so much for tuning in, listening, and there'll be more coming on this. I hope to get this translation that I've been working on out soon, in the next, maybe a few weeks, even maybe a month. All right, I'll let you know. Thanks.